Hello and welcome back to another week's analysis behind the news. For those of you brave enough to stomach the Democratic debate last week, you may have noticed a prevailing theme throughout, which is getting the government to work for me. One question asked by the moderator was, what is one way that your presidency would not be like a third term of the Obama administration? Self-described Democratic Socialist Bernie Sanders said, when millions of people come together and stand up and say our government is going to work for us, not just a handful of billionaires. The idea of our government working for us and providing for our needs is one that is based on failure. One only need to look at the many examples in history of the abuses government has inflicted upon its citizens in the name of taking care of the people. Our Declaration of Independence reminds us that governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. In other words, we give the federal government permission to exist and assign certain powers, and that those powers are to be used to secure our unalienable God-given rights, which among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Again, one only need to look into history to see that socialistic governments are the antithesis of protecting life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In fact, if we use that short list as a benchmark to gauge how our federal government rates, we would see us falling far short of the goal of protecting these and other rights. The killing of 3,000 babies a day is the only evidence we need to wipe out the argument that America protects life and liberty. So it's no wonder that the Democratic debate centered on such issues as income equality, which is a nice excuse for forcible theft, and gun control, a nice label for civilian disarmament. Yet all the candidates seem to agree to continue our unconstitutional wars. Nobel Peace Prize winner President Obama announced last week that we would be leaving 5,500 American troops in the historical quagmire that is now known as Afghanistan. CBS News reported that U.S. troops will stick to their narrow but critical mission of training Afghan forces and supporting counterterrorism operations. This so-called war on terror has done more damage to our nation than we will ever realize, not only in terms of soldiers killed or wounded on the battlefield and at home through suicide, but also in terms of liberty and money robbed from citizens in the name of security. At the Democratic debate, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton exclaimed that her campaign is in stark contrast with Republicans running for president. Really? And what contrast might that be? For if there was a difference, one would think that the federal government would have shrunk or at least spent less when a Republican was either in the presidential office or in control of Congress. But does this chart that tracks federal spending from fiscal year 1900 to an estimated fiscal year 2020 show any indication of reversing spending and reining in the federal government? If the federal government has few and defined responsibilities as prescribed in the Constitution, shouldn't federal spending be somewhat level? And could we agree that significant increases would reflect additional responsibilities? If so, does this look level to you? This graph is in trillions of dollars, and since 1940, the spending of the federal government has skyrocketed. And so has our debt, as seen in this chart as well. Now, do you remember amending the Constitution to give the federal government more responsibility? I certainly don't. Yet there it is. And both parties bear the responsibility in that. Listen to both sides' rhetoric during this election, and while they point fingers back and forth across the political aisle, it seems no one takes the Constitution seriously. Yet many give it lip service. Now, we were asked last week by a Boston Globe reporter about the 2016 presidential election. We described the hype surrounding it as akin to pouring money into a hole in the ground and waiting for liberty to sprout. So what can we do? We focus on what we have more control over. The closer the elected office is to us on a local level, the more influence we have. That doesn't mean we're recommending everyone run out and run for political office. It means that we have opportunities to make a difference by informing the local electorate of solutions found in the Constitution and in the free market. We can make a difference by supporting local, state, and congressional candidates that will obey the Constitution and that have the moral fortitude to avoid personal temptation and avoid compromising principles. So don't get too caught up in presidential politics. In recent years, they have become an outlet for entertainment and a popularity contest that our founders would have vehemently disagreed with. So focus on your local electorate and raise up constitutionally minded candidates. Now, we should also briefly mention that the Trans-Pacific Partnership may not be voted on until the 2016 lame duck session. Now, we have recently thought so, and a mention in a political article this last week is backing this up. So be sure to continue calling your senators and representatives in opposition to the TPP deal. We'll have a link in the video description for you to do just that. And be sure to also sign up for our top daily news headlines and our weekly e-newsletter, both of which are free. We'll include those links in the video description as well. Until next time, we'll see you then.